Good afternoon, folks. We're here to talk about a special case, Johnson versus Grants Pass. Let me give you a little background first before we get started. On January 12th, the Supreme Court of the United States announced they would hear the case of Johnson versus Grants Pass. This sets the stage for the most significant Supreme Court case about homelessness criminalization and the rights of homeless people in decades. At its core, the case will decide whether cities are allowed to punish people for things like sleeping outside with a pillow or a blanket, even when there are no other safe shelter options. Today, I'm joined by Sunita Patel, who is an assistant professor of law and the founding faculty director of the UCLA Veterans Law Clinic, who will help us unpack the case and understand how this impacts veterans, homeless veterans, and people experiencing homelessness in general. So welcome, Sunita. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for being on this video call to help us unpack, exactly what's going on.
Terrific. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
All right, let's get into it then. The Supreme Court is going to take up the case, I think, sometime in April. Can you provide an overview of the case for our listeners and viewers?
Sure. And I'm going to focus a little bit on the live issue in front of the Supreme Court. Okay, so Grants Pass, Oregon is a small town in Oregon, and it had recently experienced an increase in unhoused residents. And this is something we're seeing all over the West Coast, all over the country, in fact, right? Housing prices are increasing, the rent's going up, more people are falling into homelessness as a result. And so Grants Pass doesn't really have enough shelter space to house folks temporarily as they're trying to get back on their feet, as they're trying to find housing. And so the city council determined that it needed to exact pretty high fines and fees and ticket unhoused people in order to, coerce them to leave the city, to move out of the city. And practically speaking, this means that people who were sitting outside with a sleeping bag or lying down on a bench would get ticketed by police, and they would face fines of $100 to $300, $400, and they had literally nowhere to go. Then, there was a case that was filed, and then the second highest appeals court in the country, the Ninth Circuit, determined that criminalizing the unhoused status, even though some of these offenses were civil violations, they determined that criminalizing the status of being homeless is a violation of the 8th Amendment's clause on prohibiting cruel and unusual punishment. If you got nowhere to go, then it's unnecessary, disproportionate punishment to fine somebody. The Ninth Circuit said, no, it would violate the 8th Amendment in two ways. There's the fines and fees clause, and there's the cruel and unusual punishment clause. And Grants Pass decided they're going to take it to the Supreme Court. The National Coalition for Homeless Veterans and other advocates are alarmed by the impact that this is going to have on veterans if the Supreme Court reverses the case. We have over 35,000 unhoused veterans nationally, and we know, especially after COVID, lack of housing, and there's more housing insecure veterans and people across the country.
All right, thank you for that overview. It seems you've highlighted like many of the ways why it's so important for us to get behind this. What do you think are the case's immediate implications for criminalization of poverty and homelessness?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think there's the most importantly, it's kind of giving a green light to localities to continue exacting these really harsh penalties and these harsh ordinances and pieces of legislation that allow police and sanitation and all these institutions to work together to try to get folks off the streets. But at the end of the day, people don't have places to go. And so rather than addressing the real problem of lack of affordable housing, they're just trying to clean up the problem, right? It's an eyesore for businesses. What it's going to do is it's going to give a green light to localities to continue exacting harsh penalties against unhoused folks. They're going to continue ticketing people. They're going to continue exacting these large fines. And one of the things that's important to understand about the way the prior decisions work the Ninth Circuit, although it said, hey, it's fine for, we don't want harsh penalties, we don't want violation of the Eighth Amendment, they do allow localities to enforce legislation that limits where someone can sleep, where someone can sit, where someone can lie down. And so, and how much property you can have. These are some of the things that the Ninth Circuit said in the Grants Pass case. So this decision doesn't, tell localities they can't regulate where unhoused folks are. It's really such a harsh penalty that is going up in front of the Supreme Court that's really saying you got to get out of town. So we don't want that to be the prevailing law.
Okay, that is understood, that we would definitely not want that to happen, because like you said, like setting precedents like this will definitely cause other localities to try to follow suit. Sunita, do you have any ideas to why the Supreme Court would be taking up a case like this at this point?
Well, I think there was a prior decision out of the Ninth Circuit called Martin versus Boise that was decided in 2020. And I think after that case, the Supreme Court decided not to take that case up. And since then, a lot of cities on the West Coast, the chambers of commerce, a lot of folks have been really active to try to say that these kinds of decisions that uphold the rights of unhoused people, that protect the most marginalized people in society, that really, try to say people should at least be able to do the things they have to do to survive. That, we have cities that are saying we don't even want to have to protect people's rights in that way, because they really feel that unhoused people shouldn't be in their localities. And again, like I said, instead of addressing the core, the reasons for these problems, they think let's criminalize folks so that they want to move away.
So if what I'm getting
Sorry.
is
So to
more,
get back to your question, though, why they're
that's all
taking it
right.
up now. So I think since 2020, there's been this, onslaught of bad press. There's been a lot of stories about housing and homelessness. And I think that unfortunately, with this court, they've decided to take this issue up now and say, and give it a good look, right? There's a lot of pressure around the country on what to do about homelessness, and criminalizing homelessness only makes the situation worse. It makes it harder for people to find housing, to connect with their service providers. It makes it harder for them to get out of homelessness. And so if the Supreme Court reverses this case, it's gonna make the problem worse, not better.
Yeah, definitely understood. It seems to me like it's a legal, not in my backyard type situation, where we're trying to move folks out of specific localities because of a lack of housing opportunities for folks in that area. Like you said, the case could definitely set a precedent for how cities handle homelessness. In what ways do you think the outcome might impact local policies and practices related to homeless vets?
Yeah, great question. I think that, for one thing, I think that many people don't realize that our unhoused populations include so many veterans. I'm in LA, and in Los Angeles, we have more unhoused veterans than any state in the country. And we're one of the wealthiest counties, and we have this tremendous homelessness problem. And I think that what we have to remember is that veterans are part of the homeless community, and we have an obligation to help veterans get back on their feet, to reintegrate. And criminalizing veterans that are part of the homeless communities just is going to make things worse for them. Even though the VA has taken great steps and is really trying to initiate a lot of programs, it's just, it's not going to be enough if before the VA gets to someone, before someone is able to connect with the housing that's available to them, they're getting swept, they're getting picked up by police and moved around the city. It's just going to make it harder to house homeless veterans, even when we have really great programs in these localities. I think the other thing that's important to remember is that the city councils and the municipalities feel under a lot of pressure from businesses and from certain homeowners and certain certain individuals in our communities to really get rid of what they consider an eyesore in the community. And I think that for all of us who are concerned about homelessness, it's really important to let our local officials know that we don't think that criminalization is the solution to the problem.
Yeah, criminalization seems to be the attacking the not addressing the root of the issue whatsoever, like we said earlier in this talk. Um, what what do you think that interested organizations and people can do to support optimal outcomes in this case? I know you just said earlier, just about 5 seconds ago, that we need to let our local officials know that we do not want that this kind of solution to the problem. What do you think is the best way that we can get support the better solutions?
Yeah, I think, many cities across the country right now, there's a homelessness or a housing committee, and they are having meetings regularly to talk about what to do and pass ordinances and initiate solutions. Go to those meetings, call. A lot of them are available virtually. Call in and tell people that you don't support criminalization, that you think that that's not the right solution. Get involved locally. Talk to your representatives. There's lots of organizations around the country that are trying to think, and local service providers that are trying to think about ways to connect homeless folks with housing, to make housing more available and accessible to unhoused individuals. And, I think for all of us not to buy into this idea, this sort of myth that's perpetuated that people don't want to be housed, right? That's not true. There are lots of reasons why people choose not to go into the shelter system that are, very legitimate and appropriate decisions for individuals. For homeless veterans in particular, I represent homeless veterans. Some of my clients have said that they feel that the shelter system triggers them, and they don't want to get into trouble in the shelter, and they feel that living on their own, they'd rather live on their own on the streets or in their car than be in a congregate living situation because of the dangers and the harm that might come to them.
Okay.
Hello, Sunita. This is Spencer Bell, policy analyst with NCHV. I was wondering if you had any more information on like the timelines of the arguments and when they'll be hearing them, and when you would need to register any additional support on behalf of any of the arguments.
Terrific. Yeah, so the arguments are going to be held on April 22nd, and they will be live streamed. So I'm sure you can provide the live stream link if folks want to tune in. We're going to try to have a watch party at UCLA, and the deadline for what we call friend of the court briefs, which is like letters and statements that you can submit to the Supreme Court, is April 2nd. So, there are organizations around the country that are organizing to let the Supreme Court know how they view this case and the effects of this case.
Thank you.
Well, Sunita, thank you so much for being on today and joining us to speak about the Grants Pass case. Do you have any final word before we let you go and get back to your super busy legal life?
Just thank you so much. It's really an honor to be able to, be involved and represent the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans. I'm not a veteran, and to work in the community and to uplift the voices of homeless veterans is really a privilege, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, well, thank you for being on here, and we appreciate your support throughout this case, and you guys at the Veterans Law Clinic and your help with the brief we're working on to get that to the court as well. So thank you very much, everybody, for tuning into this, and we will talk to you guys later.